When we ponder failure, we tend to think of something catastrophic. Failure nowadays is something that seems very unacceptable. You look at your job, failure's not an option. You can't go up to a boss and tell him, "Hey, I feel like doing a task." You're going to get fired. And the interesting thing, though, is in a lot of our systems and a lot of the safety nets that we have, there's something known as a failure rate. And there's a certain level of failure rate that's tolerable within many things. Let's say a nuclear reactor, there is going to be a failure rate, but we expect it to be low in order to maintain our safety and to protect the welfare of those around us. Now, there is a system now that's in play that unfortunately has a very high failure rate, and that is the Electoral College. It's a system, an 18th century solution for electing the president that, according to C.G.P. Gray, a very famous YouTube educator, has a 5% failure rate. That seems unacceptable, and in any case, something with such a high failure rate would be thrown off. So with further ado, I'd like to explain to you reasons why the Electoral College should be abolished, and we need to come together in order to create a new system that would benefit all Americans. As many of us know, this past 2016 presidential election was a very, very complicated one. Shifting demographics definitely made it so that things were very fought from both sides, and it over-politicized modern culture. So let's talk about the Electoral College for a little bit. The Electoral College was set forth in Article 2, Section 1, and Clause 2 of the Constitution. It laid the groundwork for how the president was going to be elected, and that, again, was the Electoral College. The problem was with this solution is that it favored the slave owners. In the book, Why the Electoral College is Bad for America, George Edwards mentions that the slaveholders actually had a huge political influence in deciding this. If it was a representative election that was going to happen, they would not have won over the larger populations up in the North, and therefore they had the whole 3/5 compromise applied to the Electoral College. So once the time to divvy up Electoral College votes came, they felt like they were more represented, even though only technically the few landowners were the ones that were allowed to vote. Also, the sentiment is mirrored in the article Time to End the Electoral College in the New York Times, and they go to mention that a very similar argument is made today with very smaller states, saying that it's made to protect against larger populations. When you look at mathematics and modern demographic maps, you see that would be false. A lot of these states that have large populations actually don't even account, putting them together would not account for 50% of the population. The issue has always been argued that cities would become the main focus for presidential elections, and again, that would not be the case. I think it's the first top 10 states don't even account to like 5% of the population. So this argument doesn't hold water in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it detracts from the value of votes that just certain states would have. And that brings me to my second point on why this system is horrible, is that it's unrepresentative to modern demographics, making the call to that taxation without representation kind of very important nowadays. Because many properties and many U.S. properties aren't allowed to have Electoral College votes, and a lot of states, because of the way that the Electoral College divides up votes, that they don't have the number of votes that they could. For example, in the journal Abolish the Electoral College, Benjamin Bollinger mentions that Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, and American Samoa are all American citizens, and yet their population size doesn't go into account for the way Electoral College votes are divvied up, nor are their votes taken into account for a presidential election. They've offered up soldiers and they've offered people to sacrifice themselves for this great country, and the problem is that they are not represented in modern politics. And once again, C.G.P. Gray mentions that A state like California actually is missing 10 electoral college votes that they are due to their population size. The issue with it is the fact that the electoral college guarantees 3 college votes per state, regardless of your population size. So once it has to divide, a smaller state like, say, Vermont will have 4 electoral college votes. But where is that vote taken from? It's taken from a state like California, making the vote for Californians a very, very, very lesser vote. And that's unfortunate, because when we go into a voting poll, we assume that our vote is going to be equivalent to the vote of someone, let's say, in Alaska. And, again, with the very recent election, it brings me to a third point, which is that failure doesn't mean loss. And unfortunately, it allows a person to attain a presidency having actually failed at acquiring that presidency. When we look at these demographic maps right here, we see that obviously that President Trump won the Electoral College, but we look at the other map, the other bar graph actually, and we notice that Hillary Clinton had 3 million votes. That means 3 million people's votes were basically ignored and deemed unjust or unfit. It puts the power in a few people saying that they are more fit to choose a presidency, and it takes away from our democracy. In the article, How to Make the Electoral College Work for Everyone, it is noticed that 2/3 of presidential visits are focused in states like Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, and Michigan. And again, that makes it seem like these states, because they're swing states, are more important than the rest. So what happens to states like North Dakota, Wyoming, Wisconsin, per se? No, they're not. I think in order to find, there's actually states like Alabama, I think, is one, is where there were 0 visits from the presidential candidate, and they were not taken into consideration. And in the same article, actually, it states that, interestingly enough, these battleground or swing states receive 7% more grant money from the federal government because they are deemed to be a more important states for the preservation of our political structure. Unfortunately, this is an issue that always comes up in the limelight as soon as presidential elections go through. President Trump, even when the 2012 presidential election came through, he thought that electoral college should be abolished. And in this case, now that it worked in his favor, obviously there's no issue, but something needs to be done about it. Maybe fix it. Not sure. I lean toward abolishing it, because what type of technologies from 18th century are we applying into our lives right now? Do we take into account 18th century medicine? No, we do not. I'm not saying that the Constitution is obsolete. It is a living document, but because it is a living document, we can amend it and we can change it. And abolishing the electoral college is a very important step that needs to be taken in order for growth to happen. We have a way more diverse playing field. In the United States, we have people coming in and becoming citizens daily, and it's become a part of life. And then we're not taking into account their votes. If a Californian's vote is not worth as much as a Rhode Islander's vote, it's not a fair system. There is no democracy. We're creating spheres of influences, and where 6 states are getting all the attention, they're getting better funding, and we're detracting away from the importance that every United States citizen should have and every United States citizen should be given. This was my argument. I hopefully enjoyed it. Thank you for your time.